Hi, folks. Elton Subway Surfer Bowling here again with another segment of Why I Hate Enter the Dragon. This time, continuing on, focusing on the individual fighting styles of Roper, Lee, Williams. This time, focusing on Roper. And I gotta admit, I've been a little hard on Roper throughout this whole escapade because compared to the flamboyance and style of Williams and the athleticism and agility of Lee, Roper just comes up short. And I mean, he comes in third, and that's not even a close third. That's a distant third from all these other fighters. So the only way that I could objectively critique his style was to forget that Lee and Williams are even in the movie and objectively focus on him. And I found out some very surprising things about Roper's style. We need to keep in mind, first, who Roper is. I mean, the character. Roper is a Vietnam veteran. Not only is he a Vietnam veteran, but he survived the Vietnam conflict. Now, I don't know where he learned his fighting style, and I am speculating, but allow me what I call a reasonable speculation. I would have to say that he probably learned his fighting style in the military. And if that's true, that particular fighting style would have to be basic, conservative, and direct, because you need to engage the enemy quickly. You need to get him out of there so that you can go on to your next target, and you need to survive. So there's no fancy kicks, no fancy maneuvers or punches. Everything is basic and to the point. And that describes Roper's fighting style to a T. Roper is a pretty amiable, pretty friendly character. His fatal flaw is he's a compulsive gambler who always loses, but he still has that amiable spark. But haven't you noticed that anytime Roper decides to fight, all that all that friendliness goes out of the window, and he's pure business. And that's what you need to have as an effective fighter. You need to turn on that killer instinct and maybe fight against your normal nature, which in Roper's case is to be a nice guy, to be a barrel of laughs, to be kind of a smart aleck, but not. That just goes out the window when he's fighting, and I admire that. Roper also shows that he can strategize. He can assess a situation very quickly and devise a plan on the spot. Undoubtedly, he learned that from his military training and maybe his exploits in Vietnam, where things are so unpredictable that you have to think on your feet. And I noticed he first had this ability when he's confronted in the beginning by Freddy's henchmen. He jokes around with them, tries to get out of it, and then one of them just said, "Listen, it's the dough, Roper. We got to break something. You got it?" He know he doesn't have it. He never has it. He said, "Sorry, this is for your own good." And at that moment, when you look at John's face, he's totally changed. I said, "John." When you look at Roper's face, when the guy asked him, "You got it?" and he knew he didn't have it, his face totally changed. And then he devises a plan to take all three of them out. And from what I understand, these guys were armed. And yet he takes all of them out pretty much immediately. And I noticed also about Roper, unlike many traditional martial artists who believe in fair play, Roper doesn't mind kicking you dead in the face when you're down. Doesn't mind doing that. So he is definitely a finisher. And what I notice also about Roper is that once he does these things, he has no remorse. So I can't stop wondering if this is a result of his Vietnam training, and that makes him a very formidable fighter. He loves to go for the groin, okay? He doesn't know about any other fancy acupuncture strike to the third meridian that shuts down your liver or whatever. All he knows is if I kick you in the groin, if I can get to that groin, the fight is over. And so that's what he always does. He does what works. He doesn't care how beautiful it looks. In fact, it reminds me of a karate instructor that I had who used to tell me, when you're tired, when you're under stress, it's best that your karate be conservative and basic, because it's sort of like having fine motor skills versus gross motor skill. A fine motor skill is a jump spinning back kick. A gross motor skill is a front kick to the groin, which Roper always does. It's his favorite technique. And if you notice in the movie, he sets up that technique more times than not. And it shows me that that's his go-to technique. It always works no matter how fast the opponent is, no matter how strong the opponent is. And we see that with Bolo. We also see that with the Bolo fight that he's a strategist. He doesn't know he was going to fight Bolo that day, but I got to believe that when he first saw Bolo throwing people around and how strong and ruthless he was, there was something in his mind, I'd like to think, where he started devising a plan. How will I fight this guy if I have to go up against him? And I noticed that when he was out there in the courtyard, Lee stepped forward kind of to fight Bolo. And Roper said, nah, I got this. And I guess Roper wanted to get some beat up time on somebody for what happened to Williams. You got to understand also, Roper has the ability, I feel, to channel his anger. It takes tremendous self-discipline and control. Again, something you get from military training. Think about it. Williams was probably one of his best friends. He probably put his life in Williams' hands several times during the Vietnam conflict and was forced to put his life in Williams' hands. You don't forget something like that. They had an unbreakable bond, like blood brothers. Then he found out his blood brother was murdered. And I think that's when he found out that, when he saw Williams dropped into that acid and told Han, there's no misunderstanding between us. Probably what he was saying in his mind, there's no misunderstanding. I'm going to kick your butt and everything associated with you. So Bolo was just an extension of Han. That's why he wanted to fight him. And also, having seen the way Bolo handles his other opponents, he did the one thing he didn't expect. Lateral movement, Western boxing, which he probably wasn't used to. What else? Broken rhythm, the whole thing. And he set Bolo up beautifully with boxing combinations, the lateral movement, the slipping in and slipping out. And then he does his patented groin kick. Not just once, about 3 times. That was a fight ender. And it shows me again that he is a strategist who can focus. Unlike Lee and Williams, we can't see ourselves in those characters because they both exhibit a high level of skill. But Roper is a type of everyman that the average person can look at on the screen and said, I can do that. Yeah, I can learn to fight like that guy. And the one thing about fighting that really counts is, can you hit the target? Can you do damage? And Roper can. Finally, Roper is actually pretty good fighting multiple opponents, which should be surprising, but I imagine also, again, and I know it's an old song, because of his military training, he was probably accustomed to that. Because when you're in the bush, they just kind of come at you continuously. You have to engage one guy, take him out, and go on to the next without hesitation. So there is a type of fluidity about his attacks and his defenses on the battlefield. And like I said, Roper doesn't mind when you're on the ground kicking you in the face. This guy, one of Han's clones, that's what I call them, one of his drones, comes at Roper with a roundhouse kick. Roper grabs the kick, sweeps the leg, and I expected him to kick the guy in the groin, which would have been good, but he kicks the guy dead in the chin, dead in his face. Brilliant maneuver, and shows that Roper really does know some martial arts, but like I said, it's basic, and basic is enough. And you have to ask yourself when you're fighting, do I want to survive this, or do I want to look good surviving this? It doesn't matter, because survival is the key. And so I would say that Roper's fighting style is a basic, conservative, let's start again, basic, conservative, strategic, and survivalist. That's who Roper is. And that's why his fighting style stands out. What do you think? This is Elgin, Subway Surfer Bowling. I usually say your creative caricature marketing consultant. This is Elgin, Subway Surfer Bowling, and that's why I hate Enter the Dragon, but not so much on this segment.